Welcome to On the Edge with April Mahoney Brains. Here, this is the spot where the conversations are pointed, the guests are sharp, and the responses are never dull. Did you bring your thinking caps? Because it's time to put them on. Because the conversation starts now.
Okay.
Welcome to On the Edge with April Mahoney Brains. You are at the spot, the place where the conversation is pointed and the guests are sharp and the responses are never dull. We're in Washington, California, in the United States. Washington with Jean Bonds. Hi, Jean.
Good day to you.
Let me tell you a little bit about Jean. Jean is the founder of the International Leadership Outreach. What she does is amazing work in Kenya. She found that to be her heart's passion. And when you hear more about the program and the outreach that she's doing, you're going to be fascinated. She's also a podcaster. I love sister podcasters, but she's working in the educational realm to help create some resilience and reconciliation. You know, educators have been hit so hard. They never signed up to be the bulletproof shield. They never signed up to be the mass monitor. They never signed up to have their tenure exploited because if you don't do what I say and get the jab and the injection, you're out. So there's a lot. And, you know, let's just look at primary school. You got almost 25, 26, sometimes 30 kids in a class and one educator. No support, not enough supplies, but still they show up every day. And those are some of my favorite people on the planet, Brains, is teachers and nurses. And you will hear me say that over and over and over again. Those are God's angels. They weren't designed to do what they are now expected to do, and then disrespected and not paid beyond a living wage. You know, they should be paid what doctors are being paid. But we're going to talk about that and a whole lot more. Let's welcome her to the show. How you doing, Jean Bonds?
I'm doing fabulous. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you for the good work that you're doing and how you're showing up in the world. Tell my brains what planet you're from and how'd you land there and what's going on there.
I am in Pasco, Washington, and it is the southeastern part of Washington State, where there's Kennewick and Richland next door. My parents died 2 years ago, and I moved here. I grew up mostly on the West Coast, Tacoma, Edgewood, Puyallup, that area. And now that I'm here, living here, I love it. It's laid back, relaxed. I feel like vacation every day. There's a lot of sunshine, so it's just perfect for me.
Really nice people there?
Absolutely.
Good food?
Yeah, well, the food is the food everywhere you go. You know, you have to
not everywhere you go, because some places there's no good food. Is there any Mexican food up there?
Oh, definitely. Oh,
okay.
Considerable amount of Mexican food. Yes.
Chinese food?
Yeah, a little bit of that.
All right. So, and I can make my own soul food. So if I got those three, I'm good. I'm good.
Okay.
All right. So are you married? Do you have children? Do you have a cat?
I have no creatures in my home at this time. I have lived with animals in the past. I have two children. My daughter is an opera singer, and my son is a second lieutenant in the U.S. Army stationed at Fort Sill, Oklahoma.
All right. Now, you said both your parents, they didn't both die at the same time 2 years ago.
8 months apart exactly to the day. They were married 62 years.
Oh, well, you know, peanut butter.
My father was 97. My mother was 88.
Wow. Wow. Those are full lives. We always say that, but it's never full enough. But the Bible says if you get 70, you know, you're doing pretty good. Anything else, you're riding on grace. So tell us about the grace that you produce in the world in your philanthropic efforts. Let's start with that, the nonprofit.
Perfect. I have gone to Kenya 9 times. So this last trip I took in January of 2021 and 22, I took reusable sanitary pads with me that were given to me by an individual here in the local area. And the women in Africa that I shared them with were so excited. They just were like, we think we can make these. And I was so astounded with their ideas and the fact that they were so motivated by that, that when I came home, I said, well, let's see what we can start over there. And so we began a school where they're teaching the girls how to make the sani pads. And so far, they've distributed 150 sani pads, reusable sani pads, to local high schools, where the girls typically miss 5 to 7 days a month because of their period. They don't have any, if they don't have the money to go buy it, then they'll like do some hard labor, or they'll have sex with some guy for 50 bob to get some sani pads. And 20% of those girls get pregnant. So it's a real issue in Kenya. You can imagine if the girls miss 5 to 7 days a month every month, then how their grades would suffer for that. And then eventually they drop out because the parents are like, well, you're not doing well in school, so we're not going to pay for you to go to school.
Mhm.
So you can see how it becomes a whole problem.
But it's a lot going on. So let me tell you this quick story. I met the author and the creator of the television show on Netflix, Orange is the New Black.
Wow.
And I had no idea until I was watching that show that women were not given sanitary pads or any type of sanitation. I thought that was a basic human right,
Mhm.
you know? So what I did was I contacted some people that I knew at Procter and Gamble and Johnson and Johnson. They sent me boxes and boxes. I packed them up and sent them to the local female prison here in San Diego, California. And they returned them to me.
What?
They would not accept them. They would not accept them because they wanted them to purchase them with their commissary money, because they're privatized prisons. And so they have to go and earn the money or get the money, from whatever people put on their books and purchase that. And I cried. I literally cried. I just
Wow.
could not believe that. So I could, and that's here, that they just deny them that. There are women like you're helping in Kenya that are ecstatic for getting that. Tell me a little bit about, I wish you had one there to show, because we're mature enough to look at that. But what is it made out of? What kind of fiber is it when you say that it's reusable and sustainable?
Oh, thank you for that. So perhaps you're familiar with Days for Girls. It's a very famous organization. There's a couple of enterprises in Kenya. So I connected the ladies in Kimilili, where I go regularly, to this enterprise that was close by, and they went there and they got the pattern from them, and they found through them the source for their flannel and something called PUL fabric, which is um, polyurethane, and it's breathable. So the pads that I brought, they were going to duplicate those, but when they saw this other pattern, they were like, well, that's a little bit better, because it gets so hot in Kenya that those pads, when they're thick like that, they don't dry very well. So there's a shield, and then you insert these different layers of flannel into, so depending upon the heaviness of the flow, you can
Mhm.
put as many as you need in there, and you just have to wash those strips individually. And
Oh,
they're all made of beautiful colors, Katanga fabric and whatever, so that it's not identifiable readily as what they really are.
well, that's beautiful, because there's a cultural difference there when it
Mhm.
comes to sex and how women are treated. I
Yeah,
know I had other guests on my show that they're still doing uh, female castration,
yeah,
and they're sending them, I can't believe this, from
yeah,
San Diego back to their country to get this done and brought back,
yeah,
because they want the woman to be pure for their
yeah,
dowry and to be married, and they want, you
yeah.
know,
It's
and
actually illegal in Kenya. It's called genital mutilation,
yep,
FGM.
yep,
I only heard about it when I was working for World Vision, and I was like, what the heck is that? I'd never heard of
girl,
it before in my life.
they sew up the sometimes they sew up the vagina, or they cut
Mhm.
off the clitoris so that there's
Yep,
no sexual stimulation,
yeah,
because they don't want there to be any pleasure. But could you imagine a woman still trying to have her monthly menstruation and she's been sewed? Or what's going to happen when she actually has sex with that person,
right.
or when she tries to deliver a baby? I mean, it is
Yeah.
just, it's catastrophic.
Yes. it becomes quite a problem over there. And so the woman, Celeste Mergens, who's part of Days for Girls, really works with that population and that issue over there, especially in the Kisi area, which is a little bit south of Kimilili, where I've done my work. But yeah, they do that, and even though it's illegal, and so what she did was talk to them about, she calls it bridging. So the idea is, okay, what do you do before the cut and what do you do after the cut? And so then she said to them, okay, why don't you just do the before and the after without the cut?
Right.
And because they themselves didn't want to let go of their culture, and yet they knew the risk. Like, it's super risky, all the blood that,
Well,
I mean,
but it's not sterilized. I mean, they're doing it in a
no,
tribal hut. They're not
yeah,
doing it in a hospital setting.
no, because it's illegal. So
But
yeah,
again,
so
there's
it's a
different
problem.
cultures, there's different
Yeah,
rituals that us as Americans, you know, we can't snub our nose at. This is something that's been going on for generations. It's
right.
not, I don't feel that it's right. But you know, there's more to it than that. What took you to Kenya to begin with?
There was an individual that I met online through a couple of other people that I knew online, and I just said hello to him in the chat when I was on a webinar one day, and he found me on Facebook and invited me to come and teach English as a second language to his community-based organization teaching. They had what they call baby class, which is like the 3 and 4 year olds up to what we would call eighth grade. And that school is still continuing. I worked with him for 4 of my trips. I took a chiropractor, a friend of mine, to Kenya and introduced him to that school, and he is still working with that school. But then at some point, I saw that what I wanted to do was work with the teachers, and he wanted me to focus on the children. And so we were not aligned in our purposes. And so then the chairman of the board of the school came to me and said, "You promised you were going to speak at my church." I was like, "Okay." And so then he created a tour, and that's when I met the gentleman that's my host and his wife in Kimilili, and that was in 2016. And so all my trips since then have been focused upon that area. It's in the northwestern corner of Kenya. And so I think it's interesting. I'm from the Northwest and I go to the northwest corner of Kenya.
Let me ask you a question because I'm curious and my brains are curious too. As a white woman going to an indigenous African continent, how were you received and what was your perception? I know it was a culture shock when you first got there.
Actually, no, they loved me. They call me mom, which is
Mhm.
really sweet. I feel like a queen when I'm there. And some people have called me on the carpet before, but you know what? Kenya is a very hospitable country, and they love people to come from another culture, from another place. And it was part of learning about my purpose and why I'm on this earth. I never felt that I had the opportunity to speak in my own country, and in Kenya they let me do whatever I wanted to do, and it was so fabulous.
You felt free.
So
Okay, you said you were called under the carpet. Give us
for
an example.
saying that I was treated like a queen. Yeah.
Well, there's
So
there's queens all over, and you know the queen is not just about being wearing the tiara. It is about how you carry yourself.
mm,
You are regal. You are respectful.
mm,
You are honored. You have wisdom. You have grace. So yes,
mm,
wear your crown.
bless you.
Talk about your crown. I've been looking at your haircut. You got a pretty tribal haircut too. You got lines. Yeah, yeah. You're doing the most. Yes, yes. So what?
Mhm.
Have you always had that haircut?
Yeah, there was a period of time. In fact, the woman who used to cut my hair when I had the lines, I took her to Kenya twice with me,
Mm,
and she got to accomplish her lifelong dream to speak to the people in Kenya. And her goal was to work with the children. Uh, Now, the hair that I have today is a little bit reflective of the fact that when I was in Kenya this last time, I got COVID, which combined with the air flight, the international air flight, it's 8 hours from Nairobi to Amsterdam and 10 hours from Amsterdam to SeaTac.
mm.
And the fact that my father had blood clots when he was in his older years, all that combination, I ended up with a blood clot. So the blood thinner kind of caused some little issues with my hair. But because I wear my hair short anyway, it's just kind of, well, okay, this is what it is.
You
And
caught
I
COVID. You caught COVID over there, or you caught
in
COVID?
Kenya, in Kenya, yes.
How was that? Were you really scared? Again, because the medical is different.
No, I didn't know I had COVID. This is the fun part about all the things that I've done. Like I just go and believe that everything's going to be fine. So it was when I got to the airport and I was standing in line to get on the plane. That's when I got the report saying you're positive for COVID. I was like, great. So I had another 11 days in Kenya, which was fabulous because normally I go to Kenya, I do my work. It's not really a travel, luxury kind of a trip, right?
Right.
So I was, basically I had to stay in Nairobi. I couldn't go anywhere. So I was in a hotel. I, hired a driver. We went to Nairobi National Park. I had my wedding dress made, just, stuff. I just
Wow.
did the thing that you do as a tourist. So it was
Well,
a very
and
different trip.
everybody doesn't do a thing with COVID in Africa. But you are adventurous, and I really give you a lot of credit for that. So you said a
Thank you.
wedding dress. Did you recently get married?
So I've wanted to get married like all my life, and I've been married before, and it was not successful. So I had a date set for August 14th of this year, and I'm in a program called Team Management and Leadership Program. And it's a year-long program. This weekend will be the final weekend of this program. So it's a transformative program, meaning that you experience everything. It's not just about learning some knowledge, right? And so I said to my coach on the 2nd of August, the date I set was August 14th. And on the 2nd of August, I said, I declare a breakdown. I don't have this guy that I'm going to marry. And so she walked me through the steps of what that is about. And at the end, she said, I assert the beloved you're looking for is yourself.
Wow.
And I cried. I was just so moved by that
So you did a
acknowledgement.
Dennis Rodman. You married yourself.
Bless you for seeing that. So in that moment, I saw how to honor my word, which was to have a ceremony, which I did on August 14th with my wedding dress and flowers and a cake and a tiara and my ring. I don't know if you can see it.
Oh,
And I walked down the aisle and I had an officiant. I created a ketubah, which is something in Judaism that the man makes all of the declarations and the woman just signs it. So I created one of those. And
wow. How
yeah, it
liberating.
was. And here's the part that I did not expect. So once that was over, it took a couple of months to settle in. And I hired a coach, a relationship coach, to create this love of my life, right? After I got done with that ceremony, I didn't want to go do the homework for that. And it took me a couple months and I realized I don't have that compulsive, addictive desire to be married. I am content with my life the way it is. I'm very satisfied. Not to say that I could be married in the future, but I love my life the way it is. It's really
Absolutely.
a fascinating thing when you powerfully complete yourself in that fashion.
Wow. Well, like I said, bravo. That really took a lot of courage, and that was very enlightening and very,
Mm-hmm.
very liberating. So I commend you,
Yes.
and now you are only beholden and responsible to self. Brains, that's a lot.
Yes.
Maybe that's more of a responsibility than being rid of somebody else. Because if you get a little kerfuffle or you get annoyed, you can't leave yourself. You're stuck with them.
Yeah. And I made some pretty strong vows that day about being the kind of woman that it takes and caring for my evolving self. And
That's
I think
that's
that's what happens. You think, oh, I'm going to get married and that other person will do XYZ. Well,
right.
no,
They're going to
not
complete,
if you're
and
not
that's
doing
not
what
it.
you need to for yourself.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you, well, honey, you going back and forth to Africa, you better watch it. You're going to get one of them tribal kings, you a queen, and be there and, just enjoy life. So, speaking of enjoying life, what else do you do that just really brings you the ultimate joy when you're not doing your philanthropic work?
I have a variety of things that I love to do. most recently in April, I was taking what I call a meditation nap, where I was laying down and meditating. And this polar bear came to me, and I was like, okay, that's interesting. What is your name? And he told me his name. And so I wrote a story about it. And then there was another creature that came. It was a hummingbird, and so on. Like, this was a very new thing for me. And so I realized that I had a podcast on my hands.
Mm.
And I wrote 13 episodes. And then I asked a friend of mine who does spontaneous music. She does personal songs and sound baths to create the background music for each of the episodes while I generated the script. And
Mm.
so I have a full first season of my podcast
Wow.
as a digital product up on Gumroad for people to purchase.
So you're going to definitely give me the link to that so people can go to it and
Yes.
subscribe and listen to it. So tell me, what is it about these characters that you've created, and the hummingbird and the polar bear? What is the premise? What do they talk about?
Well, each of them have their own characteristics. And so it's exploring what those characteristics mean to me and to them, and how I might be able to use them, or how any individual might be able to use those characteristics in their life. For example, the polar bear is a very solid character. You think about, like, it lives in a very ubiquitous environment, meaning you can't tell, up, down, north, south, and yet it always knows where true north is at. So think about adding that kind of value or characteristic to your life by considering the polar bear. Like, it's a very powerful thing. And then the hummingbird is about joy, and I do all the voices for these characters. So the polar bear is really low and the hummingbird
Mm.
is very high.
Oh,
It's
wow.
really fun. Yeah.
That
And
seems like
so
it's a lot of fun.
the hummingbird sings, joy is the flag flown high from the castle of my heart, just stuff like that. And so it's like a story and characters all woven together, and it's very lighthearted. There's no sex, drama, trauma, bad things that happen at all. It's just
Ooh.
very sweet.
Well, it
Uh,
is, and that's family oriented. It's like the days
yes.
of June Cleaver, Leave It to Beaver. Well, there's nothing
Yes.
simplistic. Well, I shouldn't say that, because my husband, as rough and tough as he is, he loves the Hallmark Channel. That is his. He'll come home and he'll turn that on. People want something easy breezy. They don't want all this
Mhm.
gun violence. They
Right.
don't want to see the excessive uh, uh, exploitation of people. They
Yeah.
don't want to see the drug use. They don't want to hear the profanity. So again, I pay you homage for that, because it's the simple things. That's what I try to do here on the edge. I try to make it simple and easy, but I get down and dirty. I'm going to ask the tough questions because people want to know.
Right. And so what I discovered, so this has been a journey for me. It's Heartscape Journey is a title for for a reason. And that is that I didn't realize what I was doing or knew what I was doing. I was just being obedient to what came to me and writing the stories one by one. So eventually I was like, well, I better hire a podcast coach. So she's actually a copyright writer. Her name is Jennifer Breeze, and she was listening to one of my podcasts. That I should say, before it was finished, it was just a prototype,
Mhm.
and in the car with her daughter, who was 8. And the next day, the daughter was doing the hummingbird voice, and I was like, "Oh, okay."
Mm.
So this is something that both parents and children can listen to. That's why I see the reconciliation in Scripture. It talks about turning the hearts of the fathers to the children and the children to the fathers. And so the idea is, in our culture today, there's this huge divide between generations. And why? And this is something that generations can listen to, sit down together, parents, grandparents, and children, and have conversation about, well, what do you think about the polar bear? Well, what's going to happen to the hummingbird? And the Lord showed me a blue sword which turns into a maiden, complete with electricity and crackling and all this.
Wow.
And then I talked to, this is the other component of my podcast. I love collaborations. So there's a woman I know who creates these um, on the computer kinds of visual video kinds of things, and she created a blue sword. And the name of the sword is discernment. So in Hebrew, there's no word for discernment. It's wisdom and judgment. And so she figured out how to put those two concepts together and create the sword. It's just phenomenal, really, what's occurred from the result of this collaborating with this woman.
I see a KPBS special, a children's special, and I love stuff too. So I'm all about the puppets, and I love puppets, and that's what I want to do. I want to create another thing similar to Sesame Street, but kind of a little bit more hip, for what's going on. And you mentioned something that's very on trend. Why is there a separation? It's biblical. It's in scripture.
Mm-hmm.
The generation now growing up, X, Y, and Z, are about 10 years developmentally delayed than what we were. Their communication style is different. Their sexual orientation and choices around that is different. Their love for life and responsibility, the lack of a religious doctrine and discipline is missing.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because I purposely wanted to create these without a strong religious take one way or the other. I saw it as a way for it to be very general. If you have any kind of spiritual background, you'll hear the nuances in there, but it's not ostentatious. There's a lot of stuff that's done. I have Veggie Tales and some of these other things that's very openly Christian, and there's nothing wrong with that. It has its place, but I really saw this as more of a widespread kind of very more generic spiritually, so that it could be for a wider, broader scope of people.
And you know what? Parents, you need to teach your children that there's something bigger and better than them. Okay. And you going somewhere. If it's back to ash, if it's under the ground, wherever, but there is going to be a transition, and death is as significant as life. Because you're guaranteed, you're not guaranteed to live. You may come through the portal of the birth canal and not survive. But once you get here, believe me, there is a term limit.
And that's a very good point too, because it's not named Heartscape Journey for no reason. So this is about the journey into the heart. And so where do we go, if not to our heart? And so looking to our heart and to understand what is the journey that we're taking within. And I kind of walk a fine line, because in the way I grew up, we didn't worship critters and all this stuff. And I'm not suggesting that I'm doing that, but there's a lot to be said about those creatures that are in our world that God created that have something to say to us in a very major way. And so listening to what they have to say and seeing how we can incorporate that into our life is a super valuable thing, I think, for us today.
But with your experience in Africa and Kenya, you have seen the most majestic animals live in their natural habitat, not behind a fence at the zoo, not, at the circus, not in a tank with the whales, but you've actually seen how they migrate, how they hunt, how they gather, how the mother takes care of their young. So you are really being able to speak their language. I used to tell my husband all the time, he says, why does the dog always come to you? I said, because you don't speak bark. So I can appreciate that and what you're saying. And the most simplistic thing is really what resonates in people's hearts. When you come full blast, hard charging, whipping them with the doctrine and, you're doing this, you're doing that, it turns people off. It makes them afraid. But if you open the heart to the gentleness, to the simplicity, to the love, I think that it really works well. So talk to us a little bit about the reconciliation that you want to have with educators, because that's key. Tell me about the work you're doing there.
Yeah, so I have a 12-week encounter group that I host. And the idea is we look at each character a week and see how those characteristics can benefit the instructors or educators or coaches or administrators who work in education in their personal life, because it really is about the heart. So last night I was online doing a live presentation about the polar bear. And what would it be like to stand in the classroom and know your true north and be and feel that true north? Because, you know, you can imagine like when it is for a teacher, there's the administration, there's the students, there's the parents. Like you can never make everyone happy all the time. And so having yourself centered in that true north in your heart is really important when that reconciliation of your own self first, before you start to reconcile what's going on in your classroom, what's going on with the parents, what's going on with the administrators. Like it has to be an inside out job. It can't be the other way around.
Right. And it has to be able to, you have to work in conjunction with the parents. Uh,
Yes.
they separate themselves, but you know what? They got a rude awakening when it came time for when COVID hit and they had to deal with that little individual that the teacher has always been sending a note about saying that, you know what, I'm having problems with your child. They didn't even know who this child was. They had no idea who this little person was. Trying to teach the math, trying to deal with behavioral issues,
Right.
trying to even get them to sit still to pay attention.
Yeah.
It was a challenge. I had a
Right.
little neighbor that was down the street and he had a young mother. She was a single parent. And one day I was down there during, COVID, and she was going ham on him. She was screaming and hollering and she was yanking on his shoulder and stuff. And I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. Everything okay? No, I can't take it. His dad's not here, blah, 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 blah. And I said, well, I'll tell you what, send him down to my house on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I said, everybody in the community knows who I am. Real cool. I said, I want him to meet Mr. Magnificent. That's my husband.
Okay.
Well, I tell you, my husband took him and taught him how to make things, but made a birdhouse with wood. Me and him worked in the garden. We caught bugs, came in. He had never had soul food before. I cooked him a good meal. And when it was time for him to go back to school, he started to cry. He said, I
Mm.
want to go to Miss April's house on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And, it just gave his mother a break
Right.
before she actually broke. And people just don't know how to recognize the signs and symptoms and trauma of their kids. Unfortunately, now it's been where the children are getting medicated. Okay, well, let's give them a little pill and they'll sit down. They won't be disruptive. You'll be able to deal with the other 15 while these 10 kids are sitting here like zombies. But on the flip side of that, I've been watching and observing some amazing things that are happening where they're teaching children mindfulness, where they're
Mm.
teaching them emotional freedom technique, tapping, where they're
Beautiful.
teaching them how to meditate and to quiet the monkey mind and not punish them and shun them and
Mm.
discipline them. Because me and you grew up in the day where you got your little butt paddled or your
Yeah.
hands paddled. Corporal punishment was the thing to get your
Correct.
mind right. But now that's
Yeah.
not it. But we also need to honor, reward, and recognize the individuals that dedicate their life to education because, like nursing, they're falling by the wayside. Mass exodus of educators. They
Right.
just don't want to do it anymore because the responsibility and the liability
Right. Yes.
so
Mhm.
is so strong. So
Right.
you working in this space is really encouraging as well. Tell me a little bit about your background. We jumped right into your philanthropic and to your nonprofit, but where does this heart come from?
Yeah, so I was in administration for 15 years, and then I was an instructor for 15 years, and actually in education for 17 years. The last 2 years of the time that I spent in education, I was working on the back end. So we were an allied health school, and we had classes that were 9 to 10 months long. Dental assistant, medical administrative assistant. So it was my job in those last 2 years to create an externship for them and get them prepared for the job. So make sure that they were interview ready, make sure that they had their resume ready, and all those kinds of things. And so I'm really, I taught English as a second language. I taught adult basic education. I taught business classes, and so I have the heart of educating. And so in a way, the podcast is that it's an education, but it's a different kind. I believe that the best way to learn is to experience with a guide. And so I'm the guide in this Heartscape journey to walk people through what they're experiencing, through the barriers and navigating through the obstacles that they have to face, which is really about what's inside of us, right? Because we can only deal with the outside world to the level that we've dealt with our inside world.
Exactly.
And then the podcast is the money that comes from the podcast. A portion of that goes towards my nonprofit. So the nonprofit is a beautiful thing because it has all you need is $10 for one kit, and that will last a girl 3 years, and then she can finish high school. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, she can finish high school, and she can go to college if she wants to, or get married when she wants to. It completely changes the trajectory of her life because most of them end up either not in school or pregnant and not married. Now that's a whole nother and the the simple thing of the Sani pad created a whole school. So the women got comfortable about coming to school because they have a reusable Sani pad. So they started teaching the women how to make Sani pads. Then they started a computer class. They started an embroidery class, and they started a welding class. So it's a whole trade school there in Kimilili now, from the simple catalyst of creating Sani pads.
Jean Bonds, what do you want your legacy to be?
Wow. You know, I have a legacy already, and that is the legacy of this work that I have in Kenya, and now this podcast, leaving that for my children so that they can one day pick up those things and carry it on, was what I thought I wanted, but I've already passed on the board of directors to a new president and vice president and treasurer in Kenya, and they're powerfully taking it on now. I can't get away with nothing, so I'm still the secretary. But I have a legacy as I live now that is continuing, so it's a living legacy.
It is, it is. And you are a queen, and never let anyone turn down your light. Thank you so much for being here on the edge with us, Jean Bonds. You are the absolute best. It's such a giving heart, such a giving spirit, and a beautiful smile, and a funky haircut.
Thank you, April.
Tell my brains how to get in contact with you, how they can support you. Brains support, $10. You can't even get really a tank of gas with $10. Go ahead and do it. Jean, I'm going to send you my $10. And I'm going to encourage my friends. I'm going to challenge you, at least 5. Okay. At least 5 of my brains. 88,000 of you listen to me. I've touched you in 42 countries. You can give Jean and her team and her mission, her cause, and some young woman the opportunity to grow with $10. Okay. So we're going to put all the information on the back. We're going to just put it in your face over and over and over again until you say, you know what? I don't want to give 10. I want to give 20. So I challenge you to do that.
Yeah.
How do they
$10 a month changes 12 girls' lives a year.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. Yeah. All right. So tell them how to get in contact with you, Jean.
So jean.l.bons@gmail.com is my email address. Heartscapejourney@gmail.com is my podcast. And then international leadership outreach@gmail.com. There's no second L in the middle, is also for that particular one. Then also you can find Heartscape Journey at gumroad.com. I will put those links in there so that you can click on them. I think it's easier than me quoting them.
Absolutely. We're gonna definitely do that. We're gonna post those. And again, the challenge is on, brains. Okay. So I need you to meet the what they say, meet the rubber where the road is. All right. Put your bunny where your mouth is. I got a bunch of them. So anyway, thank you so much, Jean, for being here with us and sharing the amazing work that you're doing and being an inspiration and being a light. Brains, Go in, like, love, subscribe, and share. Okay? This, if it's not for you, it's for somebody you know, believe and trust. There's 7 billion people on the planet. Thank you so much, Jean Bond. You're the best.
Thank you, April.
All right. Bye, brains. Have a good day.